What a panel. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being with us here today. And that was a really lovely introduction, so thankfully I don't have to go into those intros. But yeah, I mean, as our host mentioned, with me today, I'm so honored to have three icons of the Middle East here with us. And I'm going to grab it once again and let it sink in. We've got the CEO and co-founder of Careem, Mudassir. We've got the founder of Astra and also CEO of Botim, Abdallah Abu-Sheikh, as well as Hosam, who's the CEO and co-founder of Tabby. Now, speaking of unicorns and obviously the challenges that go with it and the opportunities, but according to Statista, there are roughly around 1,400, around 1,400 unicorns globally. However, according to Fast Company Middle East, there are not enough unicorns in the Middle East. According to them, there are only 6 unicorns in the Middle East, of which 4 are based right here in the UAE. And lucky for us, 3 of them are on stage with us today. So we are very, very fortunate here today. Mudassir, I feel it's only appropriate that we start with you. I mean, you are spearheading one of the largest, consumer platforms within the region. But, the ecosystem has changed a great deal since Kareem started out around 12 years ago. And so has the Kareem app, of course. You offer over, I think it's about 20 services in the UAE, and customers can now pretty much manage all their daily payments within the Kareem app. What drove Kareem's expansion into Fintech?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we've been around for 12 years, and a lot of good and challenging things have happened in these 12 years. But our adventure in Fintech was a little bit coincidental because, as you know, we started as a ride-hailing business, moving people from point A to point B. And when you want to build a business like this 12 years ago, one thing that you immediately realize is that a lot of building blocks that you need to build and scale a business like this, they don't exist in the region at the same level of readiness as they might exist in other parts of the world. So simple examples, we had to, of course, have reliable maps, and you'd expect to be able to get maps from Google and other providers. But at that time, the maps for the region in Google and others were not reliable enough. So we had to build our own points of interest database. And one of the things that we also had to solve along the way to scale the service was payments, because majority of the region at that time was still not on digital payments. Cash was still quite prevalent. So what ended up happening as we were building Kareem is we actually ended up building a pretty sophisticated and large and broad payments platform. So this was sitting in Kareem, powering the ride-hailing business. And then, as we all know, COVID happened. COVID was super destructive for the ride-hailing business. At one point, our business came down 90%. At that point, we decided that we want to pivot from a ride-hailing business to what we call now an everything app. We want to start doing other things on the Kareem platform as well. And one of the things that we learned, if you want to become an everything app or a super app, as sometimes they call them, you need frequency of engagement. You need customers to come to your app multiple times a day to drive that adoption. And companies like WeChat and others have done it through messaging, but messaging seemed like a harder nut to crack. Payments, on the other hand, felt a little bit closer. We had the capability, we saw the white spaces, so we said, let's start looking into payments a bit more. And the more we looked in payments, the more we found white spaces. People are still using IBANs for transfers. You still see lines outside shopping malls waiting to send money back home. I still forget to pay my bills once in a while. So we just stumbled on it. We saw an opportunity. And today, alhamdulillah, we're probably the fastest growing fintech platform, at least in the UAE, based on some of the things that we've launched so far.
Fascinating, fascinating. Now, moving on to a phenomenon like buy now, pay later, which has really, really taken off in the region. I mean, the buy now, pay later market in the Middle East is projected to continue its meteoric rise with obviously increasing internet penetration, smartphone adoption, and growing consumer demand for flexible payment options. Buy now, pay later is really expected to become a mainstream financial tool in the region. So Sam, maybe tell us, Tabby was one of the first buy now, pay later players in the region where you guys began operations in 2019. Please can you share with us how? How did you go from a startup to a unicorn within 4 years?
Sure. So thanks for having me, first of all. maybe just to start off, I have a bit of a beef with the word unicorn. Honestly, I feel there is a bit too much focus on what is, in essence, a vanity title. I think what we set on to build was a large company. We could have been a unicorn in 2021 when valuations were extremely lofty, and fortunately, we did not become a unicorn at that point in time. But we were on our way to building a large business, which I think we continue to build and we continue to focus on. Looking back at 2020, when we set out to build Tabby, we identified a very large problem in the market, and that large problem being credit and access to it. If you look at a core market like Saudi Arabia or a core market like the UAE, we're still at very low credit penetrations compared to most of the global benchmarks that we look at, specifically within buy now, pay later. So we're looking at a 17% credit card penetration in Saudi, 40% credit card penetration in the UAE, compared to 75% in a market like the US, and 70% in various markets in Europe. So that's a very key component of any functioning economy that is vastly underpenetrated. And so that's the problem that we went after. I think when we think about building a large business, you're really looking at solving a large problem, and that is a problem that we set out to solve. So we started in 2020, focused on that being the core opportunity to go after, and then looked at all the components that would get us there, right? So really addressing a key pain point with consumers around access to credit via existing infrastructure in the banks that serve them in the market. The banks in the region, the reason credit penetration is so low is because the banks are incredibly conservative, and they have other sources of revenue that are a lot more, let's put it, risk-free and just a lot more comfortable via government lending and so on. And so, focus on addressing that need for the customer in a very seamless and friendly manner, providing them credit that for the first time is actually friendly. Consumers enjoy access to this form of payment. And one thing I want to mention is during Ramadan, we saw a viral video come up in Al-Umrah in Mecca of a customer, clearly a customer, going around the Kaaba and thanking God for buy now, pay later. Right? You don't see that. You don't see consumers thanking God for their bank. You just don't, right? But it was actually a customer saying, "I hope, God, you never take this away from us," right? Which is incredible to see. And so, let's end with that. But
Gratitude.
Gratitude.
Good one. Abdallah, over to you. Your achievements as an Emirati serial entrepreneur, the founder of Astra and CEO of Botim, are it's quite impressive. You're building the largest tech ecosystem in the region with a significant global user base and becoming one of the fastest growing fintech platforms with a notable remittance volume. Could you share what sets apart the ultra platform proposition you're building from other players in the market?
So I think what we've seen maybe over the past, so there has been waves of technology that happened over maybe the past 20 years. We've seen a massive focus on websites at a certain point, and that moved to IM comms with BlackBerry and what have you. And then when just the internet speed was good enough, we moved into apps. Then came the super app era where things were getting built on top of certain operational infrastructure, mainly ride-hailing to start with. When COVID came about, I think about two years ago, right about when we started Astra, my thinking was ride-hailing is extremely expensive, it's very difficult to operate, you have a lot of moving parts and so on, and it still might not be for everyone. And like Mudassir mentioned, the key to a platform is high usage. And we felt that the only natural high use case or ultra high use case is communications. And that's where we thought, we need a messaging platform or we need a communications platform because in essence, that's what handhelds are made for. They're made for you to communicate. So our thinking was more WeChat than it was Uber. And the thinking was, if we are able to convert the way people communicate to create not just social communication, but also financial communication, then we can unlock a big, or we can bring down the user journey to become a lot easier in many ways and senses. And I think that's what materialized, is because today we look at about 200 million users that do billions of minutes on a daily basis. So we look at an average usage per user of a few hours per day, which is very difficult to achieve with a lot of other, whether it's banking services or food services or ride-hailing services. You don't get that usage, you don't get that screen time with the user. But I think once you start looking into the data, and we know that you're communicating, say, in an expatful market like the UAE with your family on hourly basis almost, or on a few times a day, the next thing you want to do is you want to support your family, or you want to communicate, say, financially. So the thinking for us was not a lot of people know, or not a lot of people want to go stand in line to send a transfer. Not a lot of people want to pay a ton of fees to do that. And almost like Hosam said, nobody knows how to use a banking app. So me, myself included. So, the thinking was, if we can just get people to text money back home, just like because my grandma knows how to text, everybody knows how to text, not really everybody knows to use a bunch of other platforms. And that's what I think people found that to be a very natural continuation of their communications journey. And that basically enabled us to start cracking more and more fintech uses. So remittance was one. I think we're processing about $1 billion a month now, somewhere close to that. We're doing with Mastercard, actually, I think they've announced we've issued the highest number of cards to be issued by a fintech. And I don't think that's because we've really done anything super genius in positioning the products. Those are all products that have historically really existed for a very long time. I think simplicity was maybe the key of how we push those things out to users. So I think the differentiation between Ultra and Super, I feel Super platforms were historically usually built on operational backbones, on operational bases, maybe on very difficult unit economics as well when it comes to the operational businesses. Those are very difficult businesses to set up. Like we've seen Careem, we've seen Uber, we've seen Grab. It takes tens of years to actually be able to perfect that infrastructure. With an Ultra platform, I think you just have a lot more usage on the backbone use case, and that's where we expanded from. So that's, I think, where the main difference is.
Thanks. I mean, I often sit with my team, and we often discuss, which fintech's really going to make it. And it's difficult to say, right? Especially from where we sit. But I think the key things we look for is the purpose. I mean, what purpose does the fintech serve? And you look at the team behind it. Are they passionate? Do they have passion behind it? And it's quite cliche to say this, but I think if you know your purpose and if you're passionate about delivering it, the profit will follow, right? The profit comes in. So I just thought I'd also say something smart and clever, because you guys are, that's what you guys are. But Mudassir, back to you, please. Kareem is notorious for solving friction of daily life by providing users with convenience and value. What is the secret to creating a service that people can actually rely upon on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, notorious is an interesting word, but fine. Look, I think at the highest levels, everything that we have built at Careem, frankly, we've built it for ourselves. And then we have made available to other customers. And we are probably some of the biggest customers of Careem services, all of them that exist on the app. And one thing that you realize as you start becoming a customer of some of the services that we have on the app, unfortunately, in our region, you cannot take reliability for granted. You cannot expect industrial-grade dependability from most of the online services. And we learned it the hard way through ride-hailing, right? Something or other keeps happening. Car breaks down, there is traffic, there is rains, a captain doesn't feel like doing this booking, something else goes wrong. And one thing that you have to ingrain in your DNA when you're building an operational business like this is every experience matters. And this is a value at Careem now, EEM, we call it EEM. And every time a customer interacts with Careem, we want to make sure that their experience is as good as possible. And yes, we'll have some failure here, some learnings here, some learnings there, but every day you have to analyze these failures, you have to learn from them, and you have to make it better and better and better. So it's really just we were forced to learn it, we have learned it, and I actually feel that this learning is extremely valuable for what we're trying to do in the broader fintech space. Because when it comes to companies like services like ride-hailing, the customer is okay if you don't give them a car once in a while. It's okay, they'll still come back to you the next day if you're not able to give them a car once in a while. But if you mess around with their money, then you've just lost them, right? And you've lost all of their friends and family as well. So the bar that you need on dependability, reliability, trust on fintech services is extremely, extremely high. And some of the DNA is quite helpful, right? Every time we have some issue, we make sure that we understand the issue and solve that issue. Now, you talked about convenience and value, and this is where maybe I think I'd love to get Abdullah's view on this as well. Convenience is a given when you put multiple things in a single app. And sometimes people ask me, why do you have multiple things in an app? We all have different apps. We can just open the other app and use the service. Yes, today you can easily do that. But especially with what we're able to do now through machine learning, AI, personalization, that all of this enables, every single service that you will get from the Careem app is going to be way better than what you'll get on an individual app just because you're doing other things on Careem as well. So bit by bit, these things will become way more personal, way more better for you than something else. So that's something that's going to enhance the convenience value proposition. And there is a value proposition as well. If you just think of the basic economics of building a service, you have to acquire customers, and customer acquisition is not cheap, as we all know. And then you have to sort of monetize the customers that you've acquired. If you have one app for food, one app for grocery, one app for ride-hailing, one app for something else, you're basically doing a lot of acquisition, and the lifetime value is basically completely fragmented across multiple platforms. So once we crack the convenience value proposition in a very, very compelling way, this is a fundamentally more efficient platform. An efficient platform basically means that we're able to provide the same services to customers at a lower price, because you're not going to absorb the value. It's a competitive marketplace. So the value will actually go back to the customer. So if you use multiple things on the Careem app, you'll actually save money as opposed to using individual apps to do multiple things. So the Everything app is sort of our macro bet on the convenience and the value proposition that we believe customers care about.
Great, great. Hosam, let's speak a bit about the Middle East. I mean, it's a really wonderful ecosystem where I believe every market is different. And I think many people from outside, myself included, being a South African, but many people from outside need to remember that each market is unique with different consumer habits and obviously like different regulatory bodies as an example. What specific factors, in your opinion, make the Middle East a unique environment for startups aiming to become unicorns?
So unique in a few ways, right? On kind of the opportunity side, I'd say it is a very young, dynamic, tech-savvy consumer that adopts technology very quickly. We saw that in the early days of Namshi, where we were one of the fastest markets globally to adopt app shopping. Right? In no time, in 2015, I think 90% of our volume was coming through the app, compared to other players similar to us in the US and Europe at 50% app penetration. So the consumer is savvy, and they're willing to try new things, and early adopters are not a small group. So I think that's quite appealing. It's a very diverse set of customers as well, specifically if you look at the UAE, where 90% of the consumers are expats. But that brings with it a set of challenges as well. The set of challenges is serving these different types of customers. And so the opportunity that we talk about over here is just local know-how becomes a lot more relevant, a lot more important, compared to a global player coming to this market and thinking that they can build a one-size-fits-all. And not just thinking, I think they're not naive in thinking that. I think it's just too much of an investment for them to start building for multiple types of customers in a market that is not core to theirs. So that's on the opportunity side. I think on the challenges and what makes it again, a challenge, but similarly an opportunity, is on the regulatory front, because we are so fragmented as a group of economies, we're having to build and address regulators in multiple markets. And so we will make those investments accordingly, as opposed to global players that just don't and don't see the value in it, or don't have the attention span or the willingness to invest. And therefore, we will invest in addressing the requirements of the Saudi regulator. We will invest in addressing the requirements of the UAE regulator. It's just, it's necessary for us, and that becomes a bit of a moat as where we are today, because we're unlikely to see our global competitors come to this market and invest the same time and energy and resources that we did over here. So, very exciting market. Obviously comes with the challenges, but the challenges are really what make this opportunity a lot more exciting, a lot more interesting, and a lot more defensible once we build a large business.
Cool, thanks. Abdallah, over to you. I mean, and could you share your perspectives on why Fintech in particular is such a crucial component of your vision, and how you see the tech and Fintech sectors evolving in the region in the near future?
So I think I really like Hosam's perspective on the whole unicorn angle and business and so on. I don't think we don't really have a massive focus at Astra of looking at how do we become a unicorn or anything or how did we become a unicorn, anything of that sort. We just focus on problem statements, and we try and find a bigger problem every time. It's a natural continuation for us to allow our users to avail financial services, because we see their behavior in communications. And we see that, we know you're communicating to India, for example, or to the Philippines on almost daily basis. We can deduct you're an expat. We can deduct you have a continuum of needs that come with that span. I think, like Hosam also said, it's the fragmentation of those economies also means that you have a very synthetic or unnatural banking infrastructure that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Nowhere else in the world would you go to a bank and say, my salary is 5,000 dirhams, and they say, oh, no, thanks, we don't want to open you an account, right? So it's just this place in the world where you have a lot of clients who are, a $100 million plus client. They're trying to get the same service from the same bank for a 3,000 dirham a month client, and that just creates a very a weird infrastructure. Obviously, the cost doesn't avail for both. The same bank can't serve both, and that creates a lot of gap in the services those people receive. And to Mudassir's point on how do you make things seamless, I think, just a question to the room, how many people own an iPhone here? Like, how many of you own the latest model of the iPhone, or like one of the latest two? So when you look at the UAE, you'd be surprised to know that, when we develop technology, we develop it under extremely good conditions, very good Wi-Fi. We use extremely good phones for our testers and developers. But when you come and look at the 80% of people in the UAE, the labor class, the blue collars, the waiters, the taxi drivers, they don't have iPhones, right? They don't have the latest iPhone. Technology works very differently to them as opposed as it works to us, and so do financial services. So they see a completely different side of the coin as compared to what we see. And I think this is what we really focus on most of the time. I see a lot of people, Hosam calls them our beloved competitors, but I see a lot of people trying to solve for problems that really exist maybe for like me and 3 other people, and they completely forgo the 80% of people who are actually the moving wheel of most of the economy. And that's where most of our focus is when we do remittances, when we do cards, when we do wallet, when we do all of our services. That's where our focus is, more than it is how do we work on a unicorn status kind of thing or something of the sort.
There we go. Purpose and passion, once again.
Simplicity.
And simplicity, got it. Mudassir, we're running out of time, but I'm going to ask all of you the same question, and we'll start with you. Sure. I want you guys to look into your crystal balls now, okay? So look into your crystal ball and tell us from your perspective, what are the challenges and opportunities for the next generation of fintech startups, probably sitting in this room? So what are those challenges as well as opportunities for these guys?
Yeah, let's start with the opportunity, right? And I think both Abdullah and Hosam has mentioned it. A lot of financial services are still broken, right? Many things, whether opening bank accounts, sending money through lines, exchanging IBANs, this is still very, very primitive. Most people don't like their banks. That's the second reason. And third, unlike some other parts of the world, we don't have a dominant fintech yet. So that space is still wide open. So opportunity is very clear, wide open, and it's up for the grabs. Challenges, there's a reason why it's not been done. Building something industrial grade, reliable, that people will trust is not easy. So I think that is something that we need to crack. I start wearing more suits than T-shirts to start building trust. And then I think, lastly, the fragmentation is a real problem. I think each of these economies that we operate in are relatively small. You need to make large investments sometimes to make these big platforms happen. And at the moment, there are a lot of regulatory silos that need to be worked on independently to drive adoption. And that is going to come in the way of some of the smaller economies getting some of these services, because we'll solve for the Saudis and the UAEs, but the rest will have to wait a bit longer to get some of these things.
Thanks. Hosam, you want to build on that?
I would mention the same things exactly. I don't think there is much more to expand there in terms of challenges and opportunities. I would just one kind of word of advice in a way is we see a lot of fintechs in this market right now come up and build solutions that are nice to haves that require that address problems in very mature markets quite well, without really addressing or looking at what the fundamentals are in this market, and the fundamentals are largely still broken and still subpar. And so, when a solution is attractive in a market like the US or Europe, it is not necessarily as similarly attractive in this part of the world. And where that becomes a challenge is around customer acquisition, as Mudassir just mentioned. Fintech, by definition, is a very low margin business. And therefore, you cannot afford, as a early stage fintech, to go out and say, I'm going to build this nice to have solution and spend $100 on acquiring customers. It's just not going to scale. And so that's why it needs to come back to the absolute fundamentals of I am solving a real deep problem for a customer, and this customer is going to want and seek my product rather than me having to push this product onto them at extremely challenging economics to allow me to scale.
You guys have just added another P, and that's the problem-solving piece. So thanks for that.
True.
Abdallah, you want to build on that?
I think I'll echo what Mudassir and Hosam said, and maybe my advice to, again, another question. How many people are building a business or are thinking of building something in this space? Okay, that's a good one. I think my advice is two things. One is don't build it for the VCs. I think a lot of people are building things based on what they think investors want to see. And trust me, that's not going to take you anywhere. Investors want you to copy Klarna all day long.
And that changes, right? Just depending on the year. So
exactly. And investors really change their opinion based on how the market does that weekend and where the golf round is happening that night. So really, don't follow that. It might look attractive. It might sound like VCs know what they really want. They don't. So just make sure you don't follow in that rabbit hole. And the other part, be extremely realistic about your problem statement. If you have a problem, that doesn't by necessity mean it's everybody else's problem. And if you, a lot of the time, if you haven't lived this problem, you don't know how to build it. I.e., I feel like a lot of people try and build a problem via Zoom. So they do a bunch of customer research and they talk to, they're like 3 degrees away from the end user of this problem. And they feel like they develop expertise about it. And that's why I laugh when I hear companies from the US or Europe acting like they know what's happening in the region and they're exporting solutions to us. They're completely clueless. So be as close as possible to whoever is going to use whoever you think is going to use your solution. And I think that's the best way to get someone to go to the Kaaba and pray for your solution to keep existing.
Thanks.